See, Ryan, it's a song.
From a wonderful film about warriors.
Yeah,
They're about to defeat the Huns.
Yeah, he's gonna... This is as he's training them to go attack the Huns. It's pretty incredible. I don't know how you've never heard that song or seen that movie before.
I'll just have to watch it for myself.
I'm really disappointed.
And then we'll do a Theology Thursday review on the theological implications of defeating the Huns.
There is an interesting spiritual aspect to Mulan.
The spiritual, the unquantifiable spiritual aspects of defeating the Huns.
Definitely quantifiable aspects of the spiritual things in Mulan.
By the way, welcome to Theology Thursday, guys.
A weekly podcast dedicated to cultivating theological conversation amongst millennials.
Good job, Ryan.
There we go.
You got the mission statement down.
I just needed to fit
And introducing Ryan to Mulan songs.
Yeah, that was kind of a weird way to open it, but it needed to happen. So, how's your guys' weeks going so far?
Well, it's early on, but it's busy. It's active.
Yeah, mine has been very. It's been slightly stressful. I've been dog sitting. But dog sitting's not the stressful part.
Yeah,
The stressful part is that I have an essay, a 2,000-word essay that I've known about since the beginning of the semester, and it was due yesterday, and I'm not done with it. I started it yesterday. Yeah, it's not a very don't wait till the last minute to do 2,000-word essays.
Quit moving my sweet tea.
It was in the way of the microphone.
I don't think that's how sound works.
I don't know how you work.
Okay.
We all know how Ryan works. He's a procrastinator.
Yeah, turn your phone off, by the way.
I'm going to put it on silent.
Look, one thing at a time. We are here to talk about Theology Thursday.
2 messages.
Wow. So, a couple announcements as far as the state of affairs here at Theology Thursday. We're on iTunes now, if you didn't know.
Yay.
YouTube, Podbean. This is our 5th episode, which means we're finally eligible for Spotify, but that's going to take a few weeks to go through, but we will be on Spotify soon, now that we have 5 episodes.
I was telling students about the podcast, and some had already listened, which was really cool. A lot of them were excited about iTunes, and then a couple of them were like, well, I can only listen if it's on Spotify. And so I'm glad you said that about Spotify.
Do the students like it?
Those that I've talked to do, and my leaders I think appreciate it even more, because I mean sometimes we get a little bit more in depth than some students care about.
Well, that's awesome. Well, we've had a lot of great feedback, and we appreciate it. Keep it coming. Theology Thursday Podcast at gmail.com. You can send in questions, any thoughts that you have about the show, and we will most likely not respond. Just kidding. I check it every day. We will. So, also another thing that we're doing now that's a little different is initially we were recording an entire week before the episode would come out. So we'd record on a Thursday, and then that episode we recorded would come out the next Thursday. And one of the things that we realized was a disadvantage with that was it's not as current, and we want to be able to talk about like recent events and it to be as relevant and as current as possible. So our new recording night became Wednesday night. Now we're recording it on Monday night this week because of Ryan's work schedule.
Yes.
But that's going to be our new thing, is you're actually going to be, when you listen to Theology Thursday, you're going to be listening to an episode that was recorded like within 24 hours of the time it was released. So it's going to be a lot more current. I'm excited about that. I think that's going to be good for the show. This week is a little different. We're going to talk about that in a second. But first, I don't know, Johnny, if you brought a sub point today, but Ryan and I have quick book overviews we want to do.
Go for it. Maybe I'll think of something while you're going.
Wow, you're coming unprepared.
Yeah,
that's why you're our co-host.
Yeah.
I mean, I could make it a great excuse, but I'm just going to take it. You're right. I'm a bad co-host.
Maybe one
day.
day.
Don't try and make a great excuse. We don't care.
I don't need to try it. Well, never mind. Go ahead. What's your sub points, guys? I'm curious. I just want to listen.
Ryan?
So, I'm doing a book review of a book I read a few months ago. It's called Just Do Something by Kevin DeYoung. It's a short book. It's a very easy read. I literally read it in 2 sit-ins over the course of one day, I think. It's basically about discerning God's will for your life. There's many, many, many books out there in the Christian book market about finding God's will for your life. And some of it is just super outlandish stuff that is actually not biblical. But what I like about Kevin DeYoung's treatment of the issue is that basically all you need to know is in Scripture. People get too focused on trying to discern the signs placed before them in life and waiting for God to speak to them. But really, you should just be, in order to know God's will, look to the Scripture and read what pleases God for us to do. Do that, and you know that you are in line with God's will. So that's a basic summary of Kevin DeYoung's book, Just Do Something. I read it on Kindle. It was pretty cheap also. So easy read, very informative and practical. Highly recommend it.
Nice. We'll drop a link down to that in the description, too, for this episode, if you want to check it out for yourself. The book I would like to talk about, kind of ties into this week's topic, is Revolution in World Missions by K.P. Yohanan, which was written in the early 2000s as kind of a personal biography, but also sort of sharing the heart behind his mission with his ministry Gospel for Asia, and talking about the native missionary movement and the importance and effectiveness of indigenous missions. And it was a very convicting and eye-opening book, kind of explaining why supporting native missionaries can be a lot more effective than sending missionaries from the West, which I don't think is true as like a blanket statement. I think it really does depend on the scenario, the area. Ultimately, God's going to call people in their native homeland to minister to their native homeland. Sometimes God is going to call people to go other places. Ultimately, that's up to God's sovereignty, but it is still compelling to think about the fact that maybe the way that we think of missions nowadays in the West, maybe we're doing it really ineffectively. Like, we don't stop. I don't think a lot of times we stop to think about, like, what's the strategy behind this? Does this really make sense? And so that's kind of what this book helps you to do. The book has, you can get an MP3 of the audiobook for free. You can download a digital copy of the book for free. You can even order a physical copy of the book for free. So you really have no excuse not to read it. It's a no cost to you, and we'll drop the link to that in the description as well, so that you can check out those resources from Gospel for Asia. Johnny, do you have anything you'd like to share?
Just a couple quick things. One, since you like Kevin DeYoung, I'll just make a public recommendation so that our listeners can hear and you can hear it as well. Have you ever read The Hole in Our Holiness?
No.
The Hole in Our Holiness. That's another Kevin DeYoung book. It's a great book on sanctification. And in turn, I'll try to. I haven't picked up the book you mentioned, so just do something. I'll have to try that out. And then just to affirm Connor's recommendation, when I was part of a missions organization, Operation Mobilization, some people may know of it already, listeners. That book was widely read in our organization, and the founder encouraged us to read it, which was ironic because while he believed in the principles in the book, he also had founded an organization where he had a ton of Western people being sent, to do things. And so obviously he didn't take it as a blanket statement, but he did take it as a very, very important principle, the idea of indigenous ministry. So I love that book.
Definitely. And it ties right into what we're going to be talking about this week, which is local and global missions, the roles that they both play in the Great Commission. And we're going to be doing an interview this week, which is I'm excited about, because that's one of the directions I really wanted to see this podcast go from the beginning, is being able to bring other people on, ask them questions, and hear their perspectives on it. And since kind of our mission statement is about cultivating theological conversation amongst millennials, the fact that we get to interview 2 other college students this week about some of their experiences with YWAM, Youth with a Mission, and the global missions they've done there and that training, and also how they have taught how they've taken what they've been taught about global missions and brought it back home to see a local mission started for the college students here in Pinellas County, and just how those two things relate and kind of intertwine. So we'll be rolling that interview in a little bit here, and I'm pretty excited about that. And this certainly will not be the last episode that we have on missions. I'm a missions major, so I like to talk about missions, and pretty soon here we'll actually be having an episode about the difference between long-term and short-term. But what we want to focus on today is the local and the global aspects of missions. Now, Johnny, you've had some experience working with, like, as you said, Operation Mobilization and missions work. And before we roll the interview, is there anything that you would like to add to that conversation on the importance of both local and global missions and kind of the relationship that they have to each other, and what the kind of role that those play in the life of a believer?
Mm-hmm. Well,
I know that's pretty broad, but
no, I know it is. But I like what a famous pastor said. I don't want to credit him directly because his name might discredit his quote, and he's not the first to say something like it. So I'll just kind of paraphrase it, so I don't have to quote him. But basically, he said that there are those who go and those who send, and then the third category is the disobedient. But those are the three categories when it comes to missions. Either you're out there doing something, or you're part of it on a pragmatic level, through prayer and gifts, or you're disobedient. We all have a role to play, not just in what God is doing locally, but what God is doing around the world as well. And right now through our youth group, I like to be doing more, but I wanted that to be part of what we did right away. So, for example, every week, the students know that they can donate to our Compassion Child in Haiti, because I want them to know that if we're God's people, we need to be a part, not just of we do apartment ministry locally, but those kids in Haiti are also part of our church, globally speaking. So I think we all have a role to play in missions, is I think what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. And this week we'll kind of get to see what Noah McCauley and Eli Joy are the two people we're going to be interviewing, good friends of mine, how what they learned in their training and hands-on experience globally around the world doing missions changed their perspective when they came back home, and helped them see some of the needs here that they hadn't necessarily seen before for other fellow college students, and kind of how they're putting that into action. And if you're a local listener and you're a college student, you're going to get to hear about an opportunity, something that God's really put on their heart that's a pretty cool vision. So we're going to go ahead and roll that, and that will be goodbye to Johnny and Ryan for the rest of this episode. But we will see you all next week. Any closing thoughts from either of you?
I was going to say something about global and local missions.
Say it, Ryan.
Well, I mean, I was waiting for you to ask me. You asked Johnny. You didn't ask me.
I'm sorry. It's just Johnny has actually been a missionary before.
Right. I've never. Well, I've been on a short-term mission trip, but I just want to speak to my own experience. For the longest time, I wanted to be a missionary pilot, which would be somebody who goes to a foreign land and uses aviation to further God's kingdom. I have since changed my goals and what I want to do, but some things I think are necessary for people to go to a different place, and some things should really be reserved for the indigenous people. So for aviation, for example, some countries, you need aviation to get around because roads are terrible, or people are so often in the jungle that there are no roads to them. The other thing is that for people in that country, attaining a pilot's license is next to impossible because they don't have money, or whatever it may be. Or maybe the regulations in that country for aviation are much stricter. So now, an example of a reason for people in America to send missionaries over to a far land for aviation. So that would be an example of that. But I really do value local missions. I think before we should get involved with global, I think we should look around us first and see what needs to be done. But I definitely see the value of both and the necessity of both. Mm-hmm. So that's what I got to say.
Definitely. Yeah, and I think if you're not seeing the needs around you and ministering where you're at, you have no place, going overseas to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I think you got to start by looking around you. And the reality is, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more, and I'm sure the guys you interview are going to talk about it more, but there's really no better person to reach your culture than you.
Absolutely.
It's the culture that you're in. And
right.
Anytime you realize how much you don't know when you go overseas about the world and about different cultures, and it's not your own. It's something that you'll never really fully understand, even if you can intellectually assent to it. And the local people there just have so much more to offer, and you do too, right where you're at.
Right, exactly. That's the thing about indigenous missions is if that's true, it goes both ways. That means we're the native missionaries to our homes as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So let's roll that interview.
Okay, awesome. So this is our first time on Theology Thursday doing an interview, which is something I had wanted to do for a while. That was kind of the whole goal. And the mission statement is we're dedicated to cultivating theological conversations amongst millennials. So what better way to bring guests onto the show than have them be millennials? So I'm welcoming two good friends of mine,
Noah McCauley
and
Eli Joy.
And welcome, guys. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to be talking about the topic of missions. We're going to talk about missions on a global level. We're going to talk about missions on a local level. And we're going to talk about kind of the relationship between the two, the difference between the two.
Sweet.
I know these guys from school. And in high school, we had a few Bible classes together or whatever.
Right.
Choir.
Yeah. Some McDonald's Bible study.
Some McDonald's Bible study. That's where all great things began.
That's
McDonald's.
Right. Yeah. True.
Not really. But I want to talk to you guys a little bit about, we love letting our audience know about various ministries, and that's kind of what we're working towards, is being able to interview other pastors of other churches, interview leaders of other ministries, and kind of see what we can learn from different leadership strategies and ministry models. So tell me a little bit about Youth with a Mission and what they're all about.
Yeah. Youth with a Mission is an organization dedicated to empowering youth to go into the nations and to spread the gospel. One of their main focuses is in a program called a Discipleship Training School, or DTS. And that school is a 5-month program where for 3 months you're getting lectured on different topics in the Bible about mission work, just about your relationship with the Lord, and building off that relationship to send you out. During that 3-month lecture phase, you're doing stuff like weekly evangelism stuff, getting plugged in the area wherever you're based at. And then for 2 months, you'll go to a different country and do outreach. And it's really an amazing experience.
Yeah, so our DTS, Noah and I just completed ours, and we were based in Orlando. And we just did the fall school. And so I went to Thailand and Noah went to Central Asia.
Yep. So how did you hear about Youth with a Mission?
I had a longtime friend, actually one of my sister's friends, do it. And he is actually on staff now and is married and stuff. But when he was home, he was fundraising to go back on staff. And we hosted him at our house one night and had him just really share his heart for missions and for YWAM and what it's all about, and that really swayed me to check it out.
Yeah, I was just looking for a place that I could pursue mission work because I had a heart for missions, and overheard someone one day just talking about Youth with a Mission and decided to look it up, and turned out it was exactly what I was looking for. So
that's awesome. So what were some of the highlights of that training time of the school before you went out?
So just I think honestly was the teachers. They would bring in people from within. Well, I think all the teachers were from within YWAM, but just all around the world. We had a teacher from South Africa. We had one that was originally from India. So we just had a lot of different viewpoints and a lot of cool stories and testimonies. But yeah, so I just really enjoyed every week there was a different topic, and it was always very challenging, but also just super delved deep into who God was and different character aspects of who he was.
Yeah, like Eli said, the teachers were amazing. And I mean, that whole process is just you spending time with the Lord, and there's time every day for you just to be actively pursuing God. And it's something very challenging because you're just dedicating most of your day to pursuing God, and it can be something exhausting but so fulfilling. Mm-hmm. And I think during that time, I just was really challenged just how personal is our God? How personal can Jesus be to you? Can Jesus talk to you? Can you hear his voice? It was just things that were challenging to me, but really pushed me to dive deeper into the Word of God, to dive deeper into who Jesus was, and to listen for him and really grow closer to him. And I think it was just an amazing experience. I've never grown that close to God before so fast, and just really just fell more in love with him than I ever have. And he's just become such a close friend because of that.
Yeah, I think one of the things I love about the program is it's not like they just train you up and then say, oh great, now you have a bunch of knowledge, bye. They actually transition that right into an opportunity to put that what you're learning to action by actually going to another country, being overseas, and participating in global missions. So, Noah, you tell us about where you went and kind of what happened while you were there.
Yeah, I was in Central Asia. I can't really say exactly what countries because they were closed off nations, but a lot of our work was with Muslims, and just really fell in love with Muslims and God's heart for Muslims. Just going into this trip, I've only been on this side of the world in the Americas. I've been all over Central America, and I love it, but I was just really looking forward to getting somewhere else away from the Americas, and to go to Central Asia where there's such a heavy grip in Islamic and Muslims. It was just something amazing, and I loved it just because God has such a big heart for the Muslim people, and they're just so close to knowing about God. And sometimes we can kind of look at them and think, that's with all the stuff that happens in the Middle East, we can kind of think that they're somehow farther away from God than anyone else. But in reality, I just came to notice that God is reaching the Muslims through dreams, visions, just from their own word. They can hear about God because they talk about Jesus in the Quran. So to come to Muslims and to show them in the Bible that Jesus is the Son of God, that Jesus loves them, that he forgives them of their sins, was something amazing to me. And I just love the Muslims, and I hope to go back someday to be working with them.
That's awesome. Eli, your turn.
Yeah, so really similar to Noah, I had only ever been on this side of the world, only in Central America, some in the Caribbean. But so when I found out that I was going to Thailand, I was terrified because it's almost a polar opposite culturally. America is very westernized, and Thailand is completely the opposite. It's completely Eastern, very traditional, very tribal culture almost. So going there, we actually spent our first 4 weeks up in the mountains in the north of Chiang Mai. And up there, it was just so interesting to see a culture that was so different from our own, and just really learning to see Jesus and how Jesus is working through that culture, and how the church looks so different, but it's still so they have such an intimacy with Christ there. That's just crazy to see. And it was definitely a struggle for our whole entire team, and especially me, to just really be able to accept the cultural differences. And for example, you're not allowed to put your feet up and show the bottom of your feet anywhere because that's incredibly disrespectful. So we had many instances where we'd get scolded for that, even in churches or when we were at ministries, and we were so confused as to why these Christians were following these ancient Buddhist traditions of not showing your feet. And so it was just definitely a learning process of learning how to love the people through their culture and through their lens. But it was just so cool to see how God has such a big heart for the Buddhist people, and how he wants to see them like come out of their tradition and that they're so stuck in, and just really see the love of Christ.
Yeah. That's interesting. I think that's one of the things that anybody faces going somewhere else is like the cultural differences and like realizing like how seriously people take some of those things, and the fact that like, okay, there's Buddhism as a religion, but there's also like cultural Buddhism, and like people may be of another religion, but it's still, this is just how they've grown up. It's just how it is there.
Yeah.
And like we have to be culturally conscious. We got to be aware of what's going on around us, and that's true even here. I mean, you go out and try to evangelize somebody, you know, in the mountains in North Georgia, it's going to be vastly different than if you go on the streets of New York City.
Yeah.
Right?
Definitely.
And so this is kind of a broad question, but what would you say, we'll start with you this time, Eli, is like one of the biggest things that God taught you through your experience with that first school of discipleship?
So the school or the
whole thing?
Whole thing.
Yeah, the whole program.
So I think I have two things. Is that all right?
That's okay.
Okay.
We'll allow
So
that.
for the lecture phase of it, which was the 3 months that I spent in Orlando, I think and Noah kind of touched on this too, was just like the whole idea of how intimate God is and how he so truly is a father to his children. So that was just a huge thing of just like how much the Father loves us, and then how much, like how he shows it in so many different ways that I didn't even realize before going there. And so it just really opened my eyes up to that. Just the Father's love was, I guess, the biggest thing I got from lecture phase. And then for outreach, I think going into it, I had a lot of fear about the culture and stuff. And so I just kind of committed to jumping into any ministry that the Lord was going to put me in front of. And so every time I did that, the Lord was so faithful to just immediately take away the fear, and then also just to totally bless the ministry and just make it super fruitful. So I think that was probably the biggest thing, was just like overcoming fear, and how like when we're willing to step out in boldness and proclaim the name of Christ into nations that don't know him, like how faithful he is to bring fruit from those situations.
Yeah. Similar with Eli, like I said earlier, just how personal our God is. And I think sometimes we just kind of get this idea that, you know, God is so far away and we can only meet with him when we're reading our Bible, or just like spending time with him in our quiet times. And even I get myself caught up in that sometimes, and I have to remind myself, like, our God isn't just the God of the quiet time or the God of the church. Our God is the God of the world, you know, and he wants to be with us in every minute. And I think some of the sweetest times I've experienced God haven't been in the quiet place or haven't been in the church. The sweetest times have been when I'm driving in my car just listening to worship music, or when I'm, you know, like in the bathroom getting ready for my day and just talking with God and just, you know, asking him questions. It's in moments like that where God wants to meet us in the normalness of life. And sometimes we just kind of forget that he's the God of all those situations. Yeah. So that was something really powerful that the Lord began to show to me and really just expand to me just who he is and how great his love is. And going into Central Asia, just seeing God's faithfulness come through to us when we were kind of hitting walls in ministry where people were facing a lot of rejection, and all of a sudden the Lord brings about some Muslim guys who we built a friendship with, and just eventually just began to ask us, who is Jesus and what is the gospel? And through us sharing with them, they accepted Christ, and it was just an amazing thing to see how faithful our God is when we just go out for him. Yeah. Even after facing so much rejection, that he can still come through for you.
Right. Yeah, and we could do a whole nother podcast just on ministry to the Muslim community, because from a Western American standpoint, like, we view them as the enemy so much of the time, and there's a lot of stereotypes, and like, but what I've heard from so many people that have gone to areas in Central Asia and the Middle East where they're meeting these people, they're just people, you know, and like that's the thing. And like at the end of the day, any Christian would like say that they know that, but do you actually treat them that way when you interact with them, you know, on a daily basis? But that's a whole rabbit trail. Let's get back on the real topic. So you come back, and McCauley, this has been super encouraging to hear over the past few weeks. God really puts this burden, this vision on your heart, coming back, being home here in the wonderful Pinellas County, Florida.
That's right.
What did God really put on your heart as you've come back?
God's begun to really put on my heart just college-age students in Pinellas County or college-age people in general, just that the Lord wants to use people of that age of like 18 to 25. He has such amazing plans for those people to really grow closer to Him and to walk out in the power of God to see Pinellas County changed. So I'm beginning to put together just a local ministry where college youth are coming together, and we're going to just be spending time gathering together, growing together, and eventually going out and just seeing people come to Christ just by sharing our love for Jesus. So He's just been putting it heavy on my heart that there's just a county of people out here who are just dying for an answer to life, just dying for an answer to why they're suffering right now. And their answer is that Jesus is there for them, that Jesus loves them, and He doesn't want to see them in that suffering, and He wants to bring comfort and peace into their lives. And so I want to see that fulfillment of Jesus coming into so many people's lives here happen in Pinellas County.
So the gathering, we're having the launch day, and if you're listening to the podcast on the day it's released, it's a week from today, but it's going to be on a Thursday at Generations Church. This is not a ministry of Generations Church necessarily. It's
More or
not.
less.
It's not necessarily like a ministry of any church in particular. This is a student-led kind of stand on its own thing to a certain extent, right?
It's let me put it this way. Generation Church is in full support of this and is pushing this out because Generation Church doesn't have a college group right now.
Right.
So this is Generation Church's college group in a sense. But really, it's Generation Church is the person birthing this college group.
Yeah.
But this isn't a college group limited to just Generation Church people.
Exactly.
So anyone's welcome to come, but at the same time, Generation Church is going to be promoting this.
Totally a huge, essential part of it. But people from, we want to, I think I'm speaking correctly when I say we want to see people from lots of different churches come and be a part of this.
Yeah.
So that's April 26th is launch day. It's going to start at 7.
Yep.
Right? At Generations Church. So that's something to look forward to. Guys, think about this. You can come to launch day for the gathering and also listen to the brand new episode of Theology Thursday on the same day.
That is amazing.
Like, if it's a little bit of a farther drive for you, every week when you come to the gathering, since it's going to be on Thursdays, you can listen to our new episode. That's pretty cool. And if you come, like, I'm actually going to be here, so you get to meet one of the hosts of Theology
Maybe you
Thursday.
get an autograph.
Like, all 20 listeners that we have right now. Oh, good grief. Hey, this is totally something that, like, we're behind. And we want to see people come be a part of this because, like, our mission is for that generation, 18 to 25, to dig into the Word in a way that I feel like we're just not doing.
Yeah.
Theology is the study of God, and I think all of us need to... I think our generation doesn't really talk about, oh, maybe there's a God, maybe there's not. We don't care about religion that much,
Yeah.
And ultimately we shouldn't care about religion, but we should care about knowing God. And there's a personal aspect of that, there's the intimacy to that, but there is also the study of God, the theological aspect of actually digging in and, like, breaking these passages apart and really breaking them down and figuring out what they're all about. That's important. And so at Theology Thursday, that's what we're all about. We want those conversations, those kind of deeper conversations, that deeper study to be happening.
Yeah.
This, I see, the gathering is for the millennial age group, but for evangelism. It's like it's a catalyst for evangelism. It's a starting point to see more evangelism happening in Pinellas County, and we absolutely love that. So, one of the last questions I want to ask, because I love that this is something that was born after you had this experience at YWAM. Like, obviously, when you invest that much time into learning about God and serving Him, like, you're going to come out changed. And so, coming back and having a more global perspective than you did before, how would you say your experience in global missions has affected the way you view ministry at home? Right? Like, coming back.
Yeah.
because obviously this was something that God put on your heart afterwards. Like coming back home, you saw, wait, this is a mission field too.
Right, for sure. Yeah, I would say, I mean, when I was in Central Asia, a lot of our ministry was just hitting the streets, building relationships, and just asking if we could pray for people, talking about Jesus. And I remember one day just thinking, like, I don't understand, why can I do this? Like, this is becoming so easy for me just to do this here in a country that's completely foreign to me. I don't even live here, but I can go around the streets every day and talk about Jesus. Yet where I'm most comfortable at home in Pinellas County, I haven't done that at all, you know? And it just began to hit me, like, why does there need to be, why do I need to buy a plane to go do evangelism on the streets? Why do I need to get a plane to get to a different country to tell people about Jesus? Like, you know, the Great Commission is go into all the world, make disciples of all nations. So I think there's a huge responsibility on us as Christians to be making disciples right where we're at. And global missions is so important. But when God has you in an area for a time, I think it's just step out where you're at with what you can do. And I think that's what really challenged me after coming back.
Yeah, and like both of you are going to be doing the second school of discipleship. Am I referring to that correctly? Is that what it's called?
School of Ministry Development.
The School of Ministry Development. Okay, so that's the second school that they offer.
Yep.
And it's not like mandatory that you come back, but after praying about it, that's something that you guys felt led to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, you're only home for a limited amount of time before you go back out, but I love that you're not wasting the time that you have here. Like, that's huge.
Yeah.
That whatever season we're in, right, we should be on mission.
Yeah, for sure.
And living that out. So,
lifestyle.
Yeah. Any closing thoughts on missions in general for our generation that you want to share?
Sure. I'll just say, you can be doing missions where you're at.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, you don't need to get a plane ticket to go to another country to do missions. Participate in global missions, it's an amazing experience. I have a huge heart for global missions. But at the same time, realize that where you're at right now, God wants to use you. So begin to ask Him and question and look into, how can I be used in this area? Where should I be plugging in? How can I be Jesus to other people? Because when you begin to living your life for Jesus in those ways and living lives of action and evangelism, you really begin to find more fulfillment in life and more fulfillment in your relationship with the Lord. Mm-hmm. And your faith comes alive in those moments. So I really encourage you to not put that perspective that you need to get a plane ticket to go somewhere else. Just do what you're doing where you're at.
Yeah.
Same.
What he said.
Nice. So please come out and join us April 26th. We want to see people here. Invite your friends. Let people know about it.
Free food.
There's free food. And there's Jesus. And that's what it's all about. We're going to have a great time. And big announcement. This is our 5th episode, which means we're now eligible for Spotify. Unfortunately, it's still going to be a couple weeks, but we are going to be on Spotify very soon. We're on iTunes. We're on Podbean. We're going to be on Google Play in a couple weeks. We're on YouTube. So there's lots of ways to listen to the podcast. Share it with your friends. Let people know. And join the conversation. If you have any Bible or church-related questions that you want to ask, you can send it to theologythursdaypodcast@gmail.com. We responded to our first question last week. We did an episode about baptism. We would love to have more questions. We already have plenty, but send more, because that's what it's all about. We want to be having conversations about things that you guys are wanting to know more about, so it can be kind of an interactive experience, and that's kind of the whole goal. So, thanks for joining us today, and we'll hear from you next week on Theology Thursday.